Hello, everybody. Zach here, and welcome to my brand new podcast. I don't have a name for this yet, but I'm going to go with what I used before a few years ago when I talked about Tesla on a video, and I called it Zach Talks. So that's what this is going to be initially titled, and we may change the name down the road. But that's initially what I'm going to call it, and I want your input. I'm going to be uploading this to YouTube and probably SoundCloud because it's going to be an audio podcast. But I'm going to make it so you can take it off and you can just listen to it on YouTube Music, for instance, if you use that service. So you don't have to play the video because the video is just going to be more than likely a still image if I put one there at all. So this will be something a little bit different from me. I tend to do gameplay content and everything on YouTube, so I hope you enjoy this. I know this isn't going to be for everybody, and I know the topics are going to vary sometimes. I'm going to try to talk about video games primarily, but I'm also probably going to go into tech sometimes too. So if you enjoy this, you like my commentary on these subjects, and you want to hear more from me, don't hesitate to subscribe and also to follow me on SoundCloud and social media for when these come out. I don't intend initially for these to be weekly or daily content, but if they become something that I do enjoy doing a lot, and I want to do a lot of this, I no doubt will. And if you guys support it and you want to see more of it, I really want to hear that feedback from you. So, our first topic, with that stuff out of the way, is the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo, within this last week, has pretty much given us all the details, or at least most of the important details that we were waiting on. Many people don't know me as being a huge Nintendo fan. I'm not the biggest Nintendo fan in the world. As a kid, I grew up as a Nintendo fan, primarily having an N64 and loving all the content that they put out. Nintendo strives to make amazing games. Their platforms are what are hit and miss. They have some great consoles, the 3DS being one of a really, really phenomenal console, as well as the Wii. The Wii U was a misstep, and that's what they have. They have missteps. Some would say the GameCube was a misstep too, but the GameCube sold pretty well for what it was, and it had some amazing games on it as well. But you go back, the NES, the SNES, as well as the N64 were very, very important to people initially getting into gaming. These are consoles that sold amazing numbers. They also too had game lineups that nobody really could compete with until Sony came along, and then until Microsoft came along. So Nintendo was really on their own, doing their own thing, being very successful until they had competitors that really strongly forced their hand. They kind of did. They forced Nintendo to reimagine things, and in some ways that's good, some ways that's bad. Their consoles, like I said, have been missteps. But so the Switch is on I don't want to call it a failure, the Vita. The Vita sold a decent amount of units in its lifetime. We had the PSP and then we had the PS Vita. And the PS Vita is really good hardware-wise. So I'm not going to discredit it in that way, but the support that Sony gave the Vita in its lifespan was not great. And the Vita still exists, don't get me wrong. It's just, it doesn't exist in the capacity that it could, and in the capacity that Sony, if it would have supported that console, the Vita could have been a really, really big player. It could have been a player to this day and competed head on with the Switch. But since that market kind of hasn't been filled, Nintendo, rightfully so, believed that this would be in its best interest to do this, to release this console, and to take a bet on a console that's not only portable, but can also be in your home. So I'm going to talk about the good and bad here. I'll give you a little bit of history and on Nintendo. Not that anybody doesn't know about Nintendo or their history or the PSP and the PS Vita. Not that anybody doesn't know about them, but those are also too way more portables, right? Like Nintendo still has their portable lineup to this point. They had the DS and the 3DS, and they had the Game Boys prior to that, which were very influential in my growing up too. Game Boys I spent a countless amount of hours on Game Boy playing Pokemon, either on the bus to school or even at home. It was, instead of going onto a console, I would be sitting on the couch playing my Game Boy, which this has the potential to do that too. But yeah, let's go on and get into the good and bad of the Nintendo Switch. So one of the good things is it's releasing here in March, which is awesome. It's good to hear that it's very quickly coming. And I'm going to go and talk about the negatives here too, with kind of some of these things too. The negative here is that March is very soon, and the initial game lineup not that great. So that's a problem. It's good to get your console out early. It's good to get your console out quickly, definitely from an announce just a few months ago. But a small selection of games is not a good thing. As well as there's going to be that ultimate Nintendo problem. Will they have enough units to fulfill demand? Some people say Nintendo, they specifically, they knowingly don't create or ship enough units. A good example would be the NES Classic over this last winter. They might have made enough units. We don't know that they didn't ship enough units. We know that they didn't ship enough units, regardless of if they made them or not. So we'll see. We'll see if there's going to be enough. Like the pre-orders, I don't think they went out extremely fast on Amazon. I heard people pre-ordered it on Amazon, and they had enough time. Like, unlike the NES Classic, they had the ability to like refresh the page or like sit on it and wait and then do it. And they didn't have problems getting it to go through and pre-order. That could be a good or bad thing. That means either Nintendo is giving a really large amount of units to Amazon, or that the pre-order demand is not there based on what people saw from the presentation. I didn't think the presentation was too bad. I watched the entire thing. I think Nintendo, some of the translation stuff was funny. And a couple other things. But other than that, I don't think it was bad. I think it could have been a little bit more tied down. I think it could have been quicker. I think it could have been much more impressive overall presentation. But I'm not going to nitpick the presentation. We're here to talk about the Switch. Another good thing, it's a portable console and a home console. So the ability to take it off of its dock and to use it as a portable console is awesome. As well as to dock it, get a little bit more power, and put it onto your TV. I think having it be both is really good. We'll see if it plays out for Nintendo. Nintendo is betting a lot on this. Nintendo is betting that people are going to want this as a portable console. But I guess you could also argue a person doesn't even need to use this as a portable console if they want, or use it as a home console if they want. This can be a console that they just take along with them. They only play it on the go, or a console that they dock at home and it's only at home. So in that way, it's good. It fills two markets, completely different markets, if you will, and it fills that need for it being one and the same. So that's great. The bad side of that is the battery life. They are saying 2.5 to 6.5 hours of battery life. So the 2.5, which would be something like Zelda, you're pushing the limits of the console graphically, CPU wise, all that stuff. So it makes sense. You're going to go down to that. And that happened with the PS Vita. That also occurred with the PSP, where you're using something that's super graphically high fidelity. It makes sense. You're going to get worse battery life when you're doing that. The 6.5 would obviously be you're playing a old Virtual Console NES or SNES game, or SNES, sorry, game, and you're going to, you're playing something that's using very little CPU. The screen is pretty much the biggest power draw at that point. So it makes sense that there is such a range. It's unfortunate, I think, that there's such a range, but it's right like your phone. It's right like a gaming device. I just wish there was more. But we also live in that day and age. It's going to have USB-C charging. You're going to be able to bring a power bank along with you if it's something you're going to use to go on a long flight or something. You can bring a power bank, or you can plug it into if your flight has charging. And USB Type-C is quick at charging. So it's less of a concern that I saw that number and I was like, oh, that's going to be rough. But it could be worse. And it is a decent sized screen, and there's a couple other things that it makes sense. It makes sense. But from Nintendo, I wish they could have got the battery life a little bit higher. Definitely based on the past consoles. I know the original Game Boys weren't backlit, but they had amazing battery life, and they were using AA's or whatever. So it kind of sucks that they didn't get more out of it, but I understand. I understand what they're working with. It's essentially an old NVIDIA, not an old, but an NVIDIA Shield, and the NVIDIA Shield didn't have great battery life. So it only makes sense that this is kind of what we should have been expecting all along. The good thing too with the Nintendo Switch is you have Nintendo titles. Well, of course, right? That seems like a no-brainer to have Nintendo titles, but that's going to be a thing unless this console really fails, or unless Nintendo's they can't build hardware anymore. Nintendo is always going to have Nintendo titles. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but they didn't have what happened to Sega happen to Nintendo. So Sega messed up with the Dreamcast. They really, really did. The Dreamcast, well, it could have been, a lot of people would argue, I like the Dreamcast, but a lot of people could argue that it was ahead of its time, but it didn't release with the right games, and it had a couple other different problems. And Sega went, we're not going to make consoles anymore. We're going to release our games. And how many Sega games have you seen in the past? And Sega does have some good properties behind them, but Sega just missed the boat on consoles, and they don't have their titles specifically locked down to a platform. They're all over the place. So this is the only place you're going to get Nintendo titles, obviously. And this also includes virtual console titles, which I'm excited for: NES, SNES, N64, and I think they said GameCube too. Or for something I read, it said GameCube. That's awesome. That is really good. The only problem is you're going to have to buy them again if you've bought them in the past. Luckily for me, that's not the case. So this would be the first time buying. I'm going to be less on the fence of buying those things. The negative here with that reference of the past virtual console titles and what have you is that they are going to be announcing or launching, I believe it's in fall, a game service or an online game service, which is expected nowadays, and one that you pay for. Again, expected. PlayStation makes you pay. Xbox makes you pay. PlayStation was late to the game with that, and Xbox has done it since pretty much day one, as long as I can remember. So it only makes sense that they are going to be charging for this. But the thing that they did that was, and in my opinion, is really stupid, is they give you a virtual console title monthly for free, allows you to play it for free, almost like a Steam free game weekend. You're able to play it, but for the whole month, but then it disappears unless you pay for it. That makes no sense to me. It should be right like PS Plus and right like Xbox Live does, where you are able to go in and download that game and you have it as long as your subscription is active. They should have done the exact same thing. And this even frustrates PlayStation people as far back as I can remember when it was on the PS3, that if your subscription lapsed, you lost your game. And a lot of people were frustrated by that. So Nintendo, I hope they change their stance on it. I understand that they might not at all. They are Nintendo, but I hope they change their stance on it before their service debuts. If not, so be it. But it'll be that incentive to pay online and to get that free game, and then it just gets taken away from you after that month. Kind of sucks. The argument there, though, is that a lot of those games shouldn't take you more than a month to play through. Old NES, SNES games, but still, I just don't know. Some of the things though that are cool there, the good, if you will, is that a lot of them are going to enable online access. So multiplayer on old NES games and SNES games. That's awesome. That is a really, really good idea. And not for the reason of playing some random person across the globe. I like it more for the idea of you do get together with your friends, or you are somewhere with your friends, or you just want to connect and you want to play a game like you're on the same couch. Kind of how we played old NES and SNES games that we don't play that way anymore for a lot of people. So I think that's good. And to that point, local multiplayer out of the box is good, is a great thing that this has. So ad hoc, probably creating an ad hoc Wi-Fi network, almost like how the PSP and the PS Vita did, to play local multiplayer, I think is genius. And I'm glad it's there day one and built into the console. It needs to be there for that. The other good, new Zelda at launch, which is great. Mario Kart April, so pretty close here, and then the other Mario game later on in the year. So that also touches on the bad point too, the launch lineup. It's not going to drive a lot of people to the console that are passerby or that were not going to already pre-order this. It's just not. And some would argue, a lot of people would argue that Zelda is a selling title. I don't think it is. I don't think Zelda is a title that can sell the Nintendo Switch all on its own. I mean, graphically, gorgeous. It looks like an amazing game. It's going to push the Switch, no doubt. But it's just not enough to get people to. It's not like a Mario game coming with it. A lot of people will remember Mario 64 coming with their N64. And that right there is what you, in my opinion, is what you should have done with the Switch. This Mario game should have been with the Switch. I think a lot of people wouldn't have been upset about the price point. $300 too. We got to remember that. $300 for this. There's a lot of people that are fine with that. That's not a question. You know, their home console's already $250 or $300. So they're fine with that price point, but Nintendo really needs to bake in a game with their consoles as they have done in the past. And a lot of people expect from them. They expect to get their Nintendo console with a game. I'm not saying that people aren't going to buy the game separately. They are. They really are. Nintendo knows what they're doing. But it just makes sense to definitely a Mario game. Definitely a Mario game. So yeah, it's unfortunate that the launch lineup's not that great. They had also two, I think. So there's only 2 games launching with it, which is really bad. There's 1-2 Switch, which is a party game that uses more of the functions of the controllers, like separated from the console and stuff. And again, I don't think that's going to be a seller. That's almost like, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but the gimmick of the Wii was to use everything, you know, motion control and everything, and that worked for the Wii. We don't forget that the Wii sold amazingly. I worked in retail at the time when the Wii was selling, and it was insane. It was absolutely crazy. But this doesn't have that word of mouth, and it doesn't have that inherently motion control. Like, people are going to see this, and they've seen all the advertising up to this point show it as a console that can both be portable and can be at home, but not they. If they saw the original commercials, they didn't even see these motion controllers. So again, I don't know about that. That's one of those things where I'd have to use it and see it to believe it in terms of how all that functions. And the controllers are another bad too, in my opinion. It's cool that they're going to sell these pieces separately, but there's a whole bunch of problems with them. One, there's no charging grip included. So you get the Joy-Con grip, which you attach your pair of Joy-Cons to get a more traditional feel. But they're not the same as the charging grip, which has like a USB slot that also can charge. So that's a problem, in my opinion. But we'll see. We'll see how long these last. The Joy-Cons are supposed to have a battery life of around 20 hours. We'll see. We'll see if that's the case. Again, with all of these numbers, we'll see if they're truthfully what we're going to get from it. But I don't know. I'm personally excited for the Switch. I still am, even after all of this information has come out. I'm still excited for the Switch and the games to show up. But will it be something I buy day one? I don't know. Definitely for that price. Definitely when I can imagine a couple months after the Switch's launch, I can imagine them bundling in a game. We get either a Zelda themed or Zelda bundled or Mario Kart bundled Switch. Why would I not wait and pick that up, even if it is a $10 or $20 more? If it's a $325 console or $330, and you get a game bundled in too, that would be, in my opinion, that would be good. There's also one more thing I want to touch on too, though. They provided they opted to stick to a single 32 gigabyte version of the Switch, but you're able to use micro SD or micro SDXC cards. So theoretically, you could expand the storage up to 2 terabytes. So that would be amazing, or that is an amazing, a smart move. They didn't go with any. Sony, I love you, but the memory and the storage stuff that you've tried to push over the last 10 plus years. Going back to the memory sticks in the PS1 and the PS2, it's not good for you. I know it's good for your bottom line. It's not good for your look, and it was so obnoxious. I have to pay this much for 8 megabytes of storage on the PS1 or the PS2. It was garbage. It was really bad. Definitely considering even on like the PS2 you had USB ports. And besides the point, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm excited for the Switch. I really am. And I hope you are too. As a person that likes what Nintendo does, but doesn't always buy their product. And that's the problem too. There's a lot of people that love Nintendo, not just for its nostalgia, but they love Nintendo as a brand. But are they the same people buying their products at the end of the day? I think the Wii sold an outrageous amount, and it got everybody, people that were Nintendo fanatics, people that were Nintendo diehards, and then it also got everybody else to invest in it. You bought one for your friend, or you bought one for a family, or your family just bought one to have one. I don't know that the Switch, though, can do that same exact thing. I think the Switch is going to be something that you have a personal choice in and buy it. But we'll see. I may be wrong. Like I said, I'm still excited for it. And I want to know if you're excited for the Switch still as well. Did you pre-order it? Did you watch the conference? Do you have any interest in Nintendo at all? You a Nintendo fanboy? Is it going to be something you buy on day one, or wait until the lineup expands? Because that's what a lot of people do with these consoles. They wait until the lineup expands of exclusives, and then they make their purchasing decision. Because I don't know that anybody's going to buy this instead of a PS4 or an Xbox One or a PC, for instance. They're going to buy this in addition to, no doubt. And we're going to see if Nintendo can push it as an in addition to unit. We'll see. We'll see. I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode, essentially, of Zach Talks in a podcast form. Like I said, we'll decide fully on the name, but that's what I'm going to be using right now. If you did like this podcast and you want to hear more like this, please, if this is on YouTube, like this video, or like it on SoundCloud if it's on there and that's your preferred method of listening to it. Eventually, we'll probably get something set up so it does go into like a regular podcast form. But for now, this is what I'm going to do. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to my thoughts on it. I know I'm going to pretty much a lot of it's just going to be rambling on, but that's what I like to do. So, like I said, if you enjoyed, I hope you come along for future episodes of Zach Talks. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.